Welcome back to Questing Beast, I'm Ben. Today we're taking a look at Barrows and Borderlands. This is a weird science fantasy, old school style role-playing game set in a dark radioactive wasteland of magic, black powder, and dragons by Matthew Tapp. Now probably the first thing you're going to notice just by looking at this thing is that it looks just like the brown wood-grained box set of original Dungeons & Dragons. And there's a good reason for that. The group that Matthew plays with has been playing D&D for over 10 years, I believe he said. And they started with 5th edition D&D, but then they slowly started moving backwards, trying out earlier and earlier editions until they settled on the original version. And now he's put all of his house rules and his world into this box set, and you can get it for yourself. As usual, I'll put a link down in the description. But while I was watching the video that he and his group made about their journey to making Barrows and Borderlands, it really struck me the way that I have seen this pattern more than once before, including in my own D&D journey, if you want to call it that. Like him, I started out with more modern versions of D&D, Pathfinder in particular, and then I slowly moved backwards until I settled on these earlier, rawer versions of the game, versions that emphasized the Appendix N pulp fantasy roots of the game, where the rules tended to be faster, it tended to be much more open-ended, and about exploring a world with the players having a lot more freedom rather than running on railroads. I think it's really fantastic that a lot of modern players of Dungeons & Dragons are realizing that when they want more out of their campaign, a lot of these options and these possibilities are actually found in the past rather than in the future. I think that as D&D has evolved over the years, it has actually become more narrow in terms of the kinds of campaigns and games that the rules want you to explore. Whereas in the earliest versions of the game, it was much more wide open. No one could tell you what the game was because no one was entirely sure what it was. And every game master was very much creating their own version of the game. This box set is very much in that tradition, in that he gives you his house rules, he gives you his world, but he definitely encourages you to make it your own. Put your own stuff in, tear the rules out that you don't like, and cobble together something that works for your table. Let's see what we get inside the box. It comes with a complete set of dice, which is really nice. I think the original box set did not actually come with dice. Those were pretty hard to find. And there are 4 rule books. We have, where's number 1? Here we go. We have Men and Mutants, which is kind of like the player book. Psychics and Sorcerers, where you have all your spells. We have Horrors and Treasure for your monsters and so forth. And the Underworld and Borderlands Adventures, which helps you create your own campaigns and build out the world. There's also a number of really fun character sheets that have been pre-printed for you. Although, of course, the game is simple enough that you can make characters on an index card if that's what you want to do. All right, let's take a look at what we get inside Men and Mutants. But first, a quick reminder that this month I am doing a giveaway for anyone subscribed to the free Questing Beast newsletter. And we're giving away a hardback copy of 28 Collected, which has some of the best art and design and painting and world building for the Warhammer universe. All you have to do to make sure that you are in the running to get your own copy of this book is to subscribe to the free Questing Beast newsletter. Link to that is right down in the description. All right, inside booklet number 1, Men and Mutants, we have a quick introduction by the author Matthew Tapp and a look through what is this game? What is original Dungeons & Dragons, and what are campaigns that are created and run in this style? As with many OSR style games, it is very free, it's wild, it's open, it's often very player directed. You as the game master are kind of along for the ride. You're building out the world, but you're listening to your players in terms of where they want to go and what they want to do. You're not beholden to the rules. You are supposed to change things to fit your table and kind of create your own game as you go. Pretty much all of the art is public domain stuff that's chosen quite well, along with some illustrations by Matthew Tapp and Adlai Tapp. In terms of the construction, the cover is actually quite nice. It's this kind of textured cardstock here, and the pages are a nice cream color, but they are a bit on the thin side. It would have been nice to have some slightly thicker paper stock. All of your standard old school D&D terms are here. You have your 6 ability scores, but there is a new one added, Radiation Resist, innate protection from the radiation and chaos of this world, which is a big feature of the setting. There is a skill system here, very similar to the one in Lamentations of the Flame Princess, where you're going to be rolling a d6. You have a 1 in 6 chance and then a 2 in 6 chance as you put more points into your skills. The spell system does have a way that you can roll to cast, with mist casts and things like that available, although you can just use standard Vancian casting if you wish. By default, the attack system uses Thaco, which is a little bit confusing for players who aren't familiar with it, although it can be converted into ascending armor class and ascending attack bonuses if you want to. You can just work out the math. And then there's your 5 basic saving throws: death, paralysis, device, breath, and sorcery. Each of those covers a number of possible situations. The world in Barrows and Borderlands is very much influenced by old pulp fantasy. So you have things like Conan the Barbarian, you have some Jack Vance in there, but also you have flintlock and steel. So you have people with guns and muskets fighting alongside people with swords. This is a world where humanity and civilization is under siege from evil and from the shadow, which is slowly encroaching and pushing back civilization. It's a world of steel and survival. Are you going to stand by as society crumbles and falls, or will you strike out and expand the world, create your own fortresses, clear out areas of monsters, and make your own civilization? In terms of your different races, you have your pure strain humans, the ones that have not been changed or mutated by chaos. You have the kobolds, starborn, green skulls, which are creatures of radiation and undeath. You have mutants, halflings, dwarves, mycelians, which are fungus people, and fairies. Lots of different deities to choose from, including the Roach God. Reminds me of the being from Reach of the Roach God, which is a great D&D adventure. Things like Dinoco, the man upstairs, which is possibly the corporation that nuked the Earth at some point in the past. To make a character, you're going to be rolling 3d6 straight down the line for each of your ability scores. And if you ever need to do an ability test in-game, you're going to be rolling a d20 underneath one of those stats. So if you have a 15 in dexterity, you need to roll a 15 or less on a d20 to do dexterity things. Each of the different races has some minor adjustments to their stats after you create them, with some special abilities as well. For example, the Starborn have infravision for 60 feet, immunity to ghoul paralysis, which is something that's very scary in old D&D, and +1 to reaction rolls, because people just like them. Each of the classes is also going to have a prime ability score, where if you have a high score in that ability, then you'll get XP a little bit faster. So certain classes are going to be better fits for characters that have certain stats. As far as saving throws go, you have this base save that starts at 16 at level 1 and goes down to 12 at level 10. You're trying to roll above this number, but then this is going to be adjusted by your class that you choose. So if you're a thief, you're going to get a +2 on breath saves and on device saves. And then your stats can also tweak this a bit as well. For your classes, you have Fighting Man, who is really good at fighting, like you would expect. He has better Thaco, so he has a better 2-hit chance, and he can get a favored weapon that he'll be even better at. Magic users are going to get spells. They start off with 3 level 1 spells when they are first created. Clerics are going to get clerical spells. Half-casters are a little bit of a fighter and a little bit of a magic user, so they're kind of like the elf in early D&D. There's also a psychic class if you want to have mental battles with other people and blow up their heads from long distances. And there's the thief, who has the D6 skill system. Here's a number of thief skills that you can get. Anyone can try anything, but thieves are going to be able to try stuff that other people would straight up fail at, like trying to climb very sheer surfaces. And then there's the Gamma, who is mutation made flesh, a warped echo of humanity touched by fallout, sorcery, or ancient meddling. And there's a nice big Gamma mutation table, some of which are great, some of which are bad. Maybe you get extra arms and a prehensile tail, but on the downside, you are a loud breather and you cannot sneak. You can also roll for your birth sign, so if you're born under the castle, then you might get a bonus to your armor class. And you can roll for your social class and origins, which isn't necessarily mechanically relevant, but it could come up in certain situations. In terms of alignment, you basically just have lawful, neutral, and chaotic. And lawful and chaotic can have good or evil leanings to them, but that's really not the focus, I feel like, in this game. It's more about the battle between law and chaos that we find in Moorcock's books. Your radiation resist stat is pretty important, since you'll come across sources of radiation pretty frequently in the world. And as long as your stat is above that radiation level, you're going to be fine, at least for the time being. But the longer you hang around areas that are radiated, the worse it's going to get. So let's say that your resist score is 11 and the radiation intensity level is 9. So nothing happens for the first round. Second round, also nothing happens. But then you start taking damage, and then you take more damage, and then more damage, and then things get really bad the longer you stay. A fun little rule here is that when you actually die from radiation damage, there's a small chance that instead of dying, you just mutate and come back stranger. There's a whole section on different types of melee weapons and armor, missile weapons, rules for firearms, which are very powerful but take a long time to reload, so you typically just get one shot off. Now, the combat overview is actually fairly involved. When I run early D&D, I tend to simplify this down quite a bit. And this book definitely encourages you to modify it however you want. In terms of initiative, it's pretty straightforward. You just roll a d6. Higher results are going to act first. In the case of a tie, actions occur simultaneously. But if I understand this correctly, this applies to each of these phases. So first, there's the melee phase, where both sides are going to be attacking in melee, and then missile attacks go off, then magic and abilities, and then movement and hybrid actions, and then other stuff. This is quite a bit more structure than you typically get in a D&D game, and it's more reminiscent of what we see in war games. Lots of different possible modifiers to attacks and to armor class in different situations. Although, like I said, I would probably just use, a flat +2 or +5 bonus if players are in a good situation, and an explanation for how THAC0 works. This is the system where your to-hit number is better when it's lower, and also armor is better when it's lower, which is kind of counterintuitive. But what you do is you roll a d20 for your attack, add any bonuses or penalties to that, then you subtract that from your character's THAC0 value, and that tells you what level of AC you have struck. So if your THAC0 is 18 and you roll a 12 on your attack, then you're going to be hitting armor class 6 or worse. And by worse, I mean a higher number. The math isn't complicated, but the fact that things are better when they're lower tends to confuse people a lot, which is why I usually avoid it. There's even more detail here if you want to throw in some combat options, where you want rules for charging attacks or defensive fighting or arrow setting. It's all here. This is probably going to be more relevant when you're running a lot of combat, especially with lots of characters. And that's because a number of these actually talk about formations, organizing your characters into different shapes and formations that allow you to have different tactical advantages, like turning yourself into a big porcupine of spears pointing outwards so you can't be flanked. There's the death rules, where you are unconscious at 0, and then at -4 you start bleeding out, and then you die at -10. You heal at the rate of 1 hit point for every 8 hours of rest, which is super slow. That encourages a lot of downtime in cities. Although if you do rest for an entire day, you regain hit points equal to your hit die type plus HP adjustment, so maybe like a d6. If you roll a critical hit, you actually roll a d6 to see how good of a critical hit that you get. This is a little bit fun, but I think would probably add too many dice rolls for me. I would probably just double the damage and keep it like that. One thing I love is how clearly some of these rules have evolved because it's come up in game, right? There's a whole dueling system here. So clearly, at some point, some PC got into a duel with another character, and the game master had to create a system for how that worked. And here's one right here if you want to use it. Book 2 is Psychics and Sorcerers, so this is what you're going to need if you play a magic user or a cleric or a half-caster or a psychic, I suppose. If I was using the rules of this game, I would just use normal advancing and casting. There is a whole system here for rolling to cast, but I am not a huge fan of roll to cast systems. I don't like it when you're a magic user and you've prepared a spell and then you don't know if it's going to work at all. It's like giving a player a crowbar and there's like a chance that the crowbar just doesn't work when you try and use it. It's hard for me to come up with plans and solve problems if I don't know if my tools will even function. There's also the problem that there's always a chance of a critical failure or a critical miscast, and that exists no matter what level you are and what the spell you're casting is. So if you're a level 11 sorcerer and you're casting a basic level 1 spell, it might still have a critical miscast, and those critical miscasts are really bad. Some of them are just things like a mutation or all animals begin screaming, but also you might just be obliterated, or you might create a black hole, or you were never born, or you lose all of your known spells. Essentially, every time you cast a spell, even just a minor level 1 spell, you can not only die, you could actually eliminate your entire party and a whole section of the world as well. Some parties might really like the chaos of that, but what that just means is that you are very much disincentivizing magic users from casting spells. I feel like statistically, if you're a magic user and you're casting 3 or 4 spells a day, then by the end of a month, the odds of you just exploding are very high. And that's fine if that's what you want for your campaign, but it effectively means that all magic users are going to have a very short life, and that's going to have effects on your world building as well. One neat thing though is that there are counter spells and magic duel rules. So if someone casts a spell in your presence, you're able to either nullify it or you can reflect it back at them. So you might have a situation where spells are being bounced back and forth between wizards or redirected onto nearby enemies. I think that's very cinematic and very fun. In terms of the actual spell list, I think it's very similar to what we saw in the original Dungeons & Dragons list. I'm not going to compare them all one at a time, but they're all pretty familiar D&D spells until we start getting to very high level spells, and then things start getting absolutely bonkers. For example, there are 10th level spells like Adaptive Blast, where you shoot a blast of elemental energy that perfectly matches what the monster is most weak to. You can cast Castle of the Infinite, which is a conjuration that opens a portal to a personalized demi-plane and endless fortress bound to the caster's will. That's incredibly fun. Included in level 11 spells are Starfall, where you summon a randomly sized meteor to a place, which might do just d6 damage or annihilate an entire city. There's Demon Creation, which will randomly generate the demon that you summon. By level 12, you have Black Hole. You have things like Starcraft, where you can conjure a magical starship, complete with cabins, kitchen, cargo, hold, and climate control, or even summon a volcano. In terms of psionics, the basic idea here is that there's a number of different categories or disciplines: telepathy, telekinesis, aura reading, mental assault, and so forth, and you invest points into those different categories to make them more powerful. To use a psychic ability, you have to roll a d6 and roll under the number of points that you've invested into that discipline. If you roll a 1, you can't use it again until the next day. But if you roll higher than that and it's still under the number, then you can keep going. If you want to guarantee that it works, though, you can just decide to cast it as if you had rolled a 1. There's rules here for psychic duels, where if you have two different psychics fighting each other, each of them picks an attack mode and a defense mode, and then you compare on this chart to see what happens. So if my attack mode was Mind Knife and yours was Shield Thoughts, you would take 6 dice in damage to your psychic strength. And if you go past your psychic strength, it starts turning into actual hit point damage. But at the same time, they're also attacking you. So if they chose Psionic Wave and yours was, let's say, Spire of Iron Will, then you would take no damage at all. So it's kind of a rock, paper, scissors system. Each of the disciplines has a bunch of different abilities within it. So Mental Assault might have Ego Assault or Megalomania or Id Decimation. Living Weaponry might give you a Metaphysical Blade or a Flesh Whip. Lots of crazy stuff from the kind of, I feel like a lot of gory sci-fi from the 80s. Things like Scanners fits really well into this category. Volume 3, Horrors and Treasure, is going to look at all the monsters and all the loot that you're going to want to collect as you go through. I love how on the very first page you have aliens, things like Carcossans or Greys or Mantids or the Watchers. I would say most of the monsters are standard D&D stuff, but this definitely leans into the gonzo aspect of D&D, where you are free to mash together different genres, different categories, different types of fiction entirely, all into the same world, and it'll be fine. There's plenty of dinosaurs to choose from. Lots of dinosaurs, multiple pages of dinosaurs, assuming that you might have a Hollow Earth scenario. You got all of your dragons, you have all of your elementals, you have a Beholder, which of course is called an Eye of Fear here, because I think Wizards still has a copyright on Beholder. There's giants, there's fairies, plenty of types of golems, hags, invisible stalkers, liches, everything that the game master is going to need. The back section is all of the different treasure types, with plenty of random tables for selecting them whenever you come across a treasure hoard. Anything from standard magic items to gems, to potions, to magic swords, all the way to the ultra powerful artifacts. An artifact example is the Divine Arm-Launched Exploding Device of Great Holiness, which annihilates all chaotic creatures in a 30-foot radius. And to launch it, you need to, quote, Monty Python. The final booklet is the Underworld and Borderlands Adventures, which covers actually running the world and gives you a bunch of tools, especially for overland travel. It lists a number of resources at the beginning, like Dungeon Craft, and even my channel, Questing Beast, so that was very nice of him. One interesting thing is he does recommend running a real-time game, which isn't really for everybody, but it does have some advantages. This is where the time that you spend not playing the game counts as time that is going by in the game world. So if you have a week between game sessions, a week has happened in the game world. One cool feature of this is that it means that time is always going by in the game world, which means that the world feels more alive and evolving, and it makes players take time very seriously. There's lots of just really good, solid advice for how to run a very open-ended campaign. What to do to keep your dungeons fresh, especially mega dungeons that have been explored pretty thoroughly, how you can change things up, procedures for dungeon crawling, for how to search for doors, traps, light and vision, magic, and so forth. All of this is pretty standard original D&D rules. I will say that it's much better organized than OD&D, so that might be one reason to use these booklets rather than trying to dig up the original ones. I love how there's an example of play, so you can see what a dungeon crawl would look like using this style of play. Experience is mostly going to be XP for money. You can get some for monsters and some for possibly other things like role-playing, but by and large it's going to come from treasure hunting, making this a very exploration-focused style. Castles are a big deal. When you come across castles, depending on who's occupying them, they could come out and challenge you, or give you quests, or demand things of you. There's a lot of rules that take traveling across the overworld very seriously. It's a dangerous occupation. There's lots of random tables here for the types of monsters that you're going to run into. And the end goal of creating your own fortress and clearing out the hexes around it and starting your own little society or civilization is definitely present. For example, you can hire engineers, which you're going to need to do when you start constructing strongholds, fortifications, or siege equipment. OD&D is definitely a game that expands in scale over time, until by the end you could be leading armies, and it evolves into a full-scale war game. For example, there's rules here for hiring crossbowmen, or light horsemen, or heavy horsemen, or arquebus troopers. How exactly do you want your structure to be designed? You want to draw your own castle? You want to have a keep, or a gatehouse, or a moat? Here's the cost for all of those things. Of course, moving up into this domain play level is definitely optional. You don't have to do it. But there is something to be said for D&D evolving from a game where you're just playing out the story of a small group of characters, where it slowly zooms out until you're playing out the story of an entire world and of nations. All right, so there is Barrows and Borderlands. If you're interested in original D&D and you want to have the aesthetic where you have the box set and the little pamphlets and so forth, this is probably one of your best options. I think the people who created this really do enjoy playing with those old rules like THAC0, but those of course are optional. They can be easily swapped out. What I love about products like this is that it's not just another standard retro clone. This is an encapsulation of a particular world, a particular campaign that has evolved over time into a certain state, at which point it is boxed up and handed to you. It's a fantastic example of what is supposed to happen to a fantasy campaign. It's supposed to be made your own. And the author, Matthew Tapp, is not at all precious about you keeping his rules and keeping the world the way that he has created it. He wants you to continue on with this world and make it your own and evolve it and change things just as he has. After playing this for long enough, you'll be throwing out the rules that you don't like, adding in the rules that you do, and Barrows and Borderlands will eventually become a completely different campaign with a new name that is yours alone. Original Dungeons & Dragons emphasized that the Game Master wasn't just the referee. They were also, in a very real sense, a game designer. And that, I think, is one of the main reasons why people who have discovered D&D through 5e are slowly moving back towards these older ways of thought. They're taking ownership of their campaigns to such an extent that eventually they're not really playing Dungeons & Dragons anymore. They're playing a fantasy role-playing game that's been designed just for them and their friends. Thanks for watching, everybody. As usual, I will put a link to where you can pick this up for yourself down in the description below, as well as a link to Matthew Tapp's YouTube channel, where he explains how and why he created this product. Hope you enjoyed this review, and I'll see you next time.